Journey with me as I recall a cold winter's day in Washington, D.C. The air was crisp, inviting the comforts of warmer indoor spaces and activity. I was privileged to secure tickets for myself and a group of our teens to the Museum of African American History and Culture while visiting our nation's capital for our annual Litaken seminar at the Religious Action Center. At first glance, I am awed by the museum's powerful exterior. I take note of its three-tiered crowns, learning that they were used in Yoruban art from West Africa. As my eyes lower, we are welcomed by the building's main entrance, which has the feel of a welcoming porch, adorning African and Caribbean influence. My gaze then becomes fixated on the building's unique exterior, wrapped in an ornamental bronze-colored metal lattice, paying homage to the ironwork crafted by enslaved African Americans in Louisiana, South Carolina, and elsewhere. The exterior alone would have held my attention, but our timed entrance was approaching, and we made our way through security and into a painfully powerful and needed experience for all of us. Truth is that several days are needed to unearth the depth of narrative contained in its colorful exhibitions, but we managed to soak up what we could in the few hours carved out for the experience. Each section I entered somehow brought tears of pain and joy to my eyes. Each exhibition provided a lens into the Black experience. Everything from the emergence of the transatlantic slave trade and segregation to the myriad of ways Black culture had and continues to make profound contributions to our country. The takeaways were jarring and plentiful. I had thought my education of the American Black experience had been sufficient. What I came to understand was that I was just beginning to get woke. I share this with you tonight as we take some of our prayerful time this evening to honor the Black experience. For more than 40 years, the United States has recognized the month of February officially as Black History Month. Born out of a need to emphasize the contribution of Blacks within American history, Black History Month plays an important role in highlighting Blackness and Black excellence in America. Black History Month provides us a recurring time to both honor and celebrate the numerous contributions millions of Americans have made to our country, a time and a space to draw attention and guidance from the past. After all, who would not help but be inspired by Martin Luther King's oratory and commitment to racial and social justice? The arguments of William and Ellen Craft, who used great cleverness to escape from slavery? Who would not draw encouragement from the creative genius of Madam C.J. Walker, take solace in the poetry of Langston Hughes, or find comfort in the rhythms of Louis Armstrong or Dinah Washington? At the same time, we know that the recognition of Black excellence, coupled with the discussions of race and racism, cannot be relegated to just 1 month. As Jews, we know all too well that to achieve authentic awareness and justice, we must always be working to find the light amidst the darkness, using the takeaways from our past to better inform how we move forward today and tomorrow. This week in our Torah, the children of Israel are commanded to bring pure olive oil for the Ner Tamid, a constant burning light, as it's translated, that sits above the sanctuary. This is the only commanded practice associated with the ancient tabernacle that is still with us today. And why has the idea of light become so powerful and a favorite symbol among us? Perhaps because light itself cannot be seen. We become aware of its presence when it enables us to see other things, when it enables us to see other things. Recently, the light we're instructed to kindle has shone brightly for me on creating opportunities to recognize the powerful intersections of the Black and Jewish experience. Walking through the museum on that brisk February day, I was reminded of the parallels we share: oppression, exile, slavery, discrimination, and yes, resilience. That light, however, isn't only about seeing, it is also about listening, really listening to those soulful voices yearning to be heard around us, listening to their stories, their resilience, and their pain and their wisdom. Spotlighting the intersection, I sought to share some inspiring words from Black Jewish voices, leaders in our movement, and in a few moments from our own Beth Israel community. I was incredibly inspired by a few alumni of our Reform Movement's Juvenation Fellowship. Yolanda Savage-Narva says, "When I think about Blackness, I think about the richness of the soil and how it nurtures whatever is grown there. I think my Black roots have that same power, and within that power, we as Jewish leaders can multiply the effect of Jewish values as well." Kelly Whitehead observes that the intersectionality of Black history and Judaism is equally important, as she says, "Intersectionality is inherently Jewish. I believe that Black Jewish leaders can lift up Black stories by bringing them to the bima, the sukkah, the Shabbat dinner table, without it being criticized for erasing Jewish tradition." Marquis Holly agrees and notes, much in the same way that there isn't one way to do or to be Jewish, Black history isn't limited to a handful of names. It is the acknowledgement that the existence of self-determining Black people in the United States as is an act of defiance and worthy of celebration. We here are proud to raise the voices and teachings of the Black and Jewish leaders in our own community, who've inspired me, and I know so many of us, with their honesty, vulnerability, and spirit. Tonight, we say Shabbat Shalom to two leaders among us, Rodney Washington and Sarah Garrick, as we welcome them and they open their hearts to us as well.
Shabbat Shalom. I would like to share my thoughts about the intersection between being Black and Jewish. On March 22nd, 2019, in Los Angeles, California, I was born Pele Yoetz. I felt my internal self being transformed, the symbolism of the mikvah immersion being the embryonic fluid, and I'm the embryo in a rapid progression to my Jewish transition. I had several in-depth conversations with Rabbi Cantor Bernstein, who made my journey so refreshing. She asked me during one of my visits, "How would you handle anti-Semitism?" I smiled and said, "I've been handling racism all my life. They will not suspect I'm Jewish, but I can't hide being Black." I've met so many wonderful people while attending Congregation Beth Israel. I also had conversations about why you want to be Jewish, or you know what you're getting into. At the end of one service before COVID, one of the rabbis asked us to put our arms around each other. I looked over to the right. I noticed it was a white woman very distant from myself. I extended my arm to her. And then in a few minutes, I realized that my arm was still in the air. And then I understood that she did not want me to touch her. She never acknowledged my presence. She kept looking forward. And I thought to myself, she doesn't want my black hands touching her. But reassuring myself that that was not the case. Perhaps she had a bad experience with men, even though she had her arm around a man. I thought to myself, my skin is my sin. Historically, blacks and Jews have endured hate together. Crimes against humanity in Nazi Germany, where blacks and Jews were housed together in lesser known concentration camps. Walking with arms interlocked from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama on March 21st, 1965. Being slain together and found together in the swamps of Mississippi during the Civil Rights Movement. And most recently, taking a knee together during the now infamous case of George Floyd murder in protest of police brutality. I identify myself as a proud, strong, and resilient Jewish man. I'm a proud, strong, resilient black man. You are my proud, strong, and resilient Jewish family who cared for my family and me when I had a kidney transplant. And many of you prayed every Shabbat when I was on the missionary. You are my proud, strong, and resilient black family. You are my proud, strong, resilient family of humankind. This journey has been long and painful, experiencing my first racist joke about the age of 7 or 8 at a rec center from my boxing coach and rec center leader. He would like to tell me jokes about, do you know why black mothers put Velcro on the ceiling? Oh, it's to stop the kids from jumping on their beds. Or, do you know why black parents don't let the kids play in the sandbox? It's because they're afraid that the cats will bury them. This is just a few of many examples that I have, that I've lived, and that I'm willing to share. I'm open to have a more in-depth conversation, not a debate, of my own experiences. We actually may share things in common. I invite you to contact Rabbi Nevarez for my email address if you're interested into knowing my journey and more in depth of being a black Jewish man. Shabbat Shalom.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to be here with you this evening. In recognition of Black History Month, I get to share with you for a few moments about my experiences and the intersection of my faith and the color of my skin. I sit in sort of a rare vantage point that few people share, and I feel like my experiences have become sort of a kaleidoscope of moments, Like when I was still in high school and working at my first real job at a place called Heinzel's as a cashier, and the supervisor decided that we were overstaffed at the time. And instead of sending me home early, she said, I need you to go clean the toilet in the staff washroom. Now let that sink in for a moment. Multiply that by 100, and you'll have a little idea of what that felt like at the time. But I went and I got the supplies, and I was gone for some time. And when I came back, she said, what took you so long? And I said, well, I didn't just clean the staff toilet, I cleaned all of the toilets. And the shock on her face was only replaced by the disappointment that the blow hadn't landed as intended. And it was just enough for me to be able to leave that day and say, I'll see you next shift. But there's an unusual visibility and invisibility to my life. As a Jew, I can choose to be invisible because it's not obvious. Nobody assumes when they look at me that I'm Jewish. But I don't make that choice. But as a black woman, the color of my skin speaks volumes before I've even said a word. And there's a paradox to that visibility, and that is the color of my skin is inevitably visible, but it then almost invariably renders me invisible as a person. My opinion is suddenly irrelevant. In casual attire, I'm often sent to the service entrance or the catering entrance when I get to an event. And even in business attire, the natural conclusion isn't that natural for most. Like when I was in Los Angeles in trial, and the federal prosecutor who saw me in the courtroom ahead of the proceedings came to inquire about my presence, and she asked first if I was a family member of one of the defendants, and then later she asked if alternatively I was a student. It wasn't until she saw me speaking with my boss when she made the connection and realized I was an attorney. And at that point she came over and said, oh, she's with you. Well, I was just complimenting her on her shoes. And my boss, God bless him, realized instantly what was happening and looked at her and said, yeah, she's on our trial team because of her shoes. And it's moments like that in each instance that there's a choice to be made, right? How am I going to respond, and how am I going to allow it to impact me? But what I've chosen to do because of my faith is to try to strive to walk through the world B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, instead of being confined or controlled by the image that other people have of me. And it's a game changer, right? It makes all of the difference what your own perspective is. And for me, I try to look at life in the way that I think that God looks at us. You know, with all of our diversity, we make the world so much more beautiful. If you can imagine, whether or not you're an art enthusiast like I am, that if you looked at a blank canvas that had nothing on it, what would be the point? But it's the colors and the shapes and the distinctions in any piece of artwork that makes us captivated with it. And it's that reminder that as we walk through life, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, that we then see all the beautiful nuances in each other. And I would encourage you to do the same. You know, our faith is based on love and taking care of one another and ensuring justice. And there's no coincidence that each of our significant holidays, and of course Shabbat, is all about lighting candles and bringing light into the world. And so I strive to be the light that Hashem wants us to be. And when I light the candles every evening on Shabbat, I'm reminded that the smallest flame can banish that darkness, and that B'Tselem Elohim, in his image, we can do much more together than looking at each other for our differences. Thank you so much for letting me share with you this evening. Good Shabbos.
Wow. What power, what beauty, what pain. Shabbat isn't just celebrating and honoring the gratitudes, it's also looking at how we transcend into the holiness and find the Kodesh. I was recently reminded of a story from the Talmud in which tells of two rabbis walking in the Arba Valley in Israel. At dawn, they saw a spark of light pierce the horizon. They described this bit of light and its evolving expanse as what redemption feels like. In the context of Purim, which just concluded, they referenced to what it felt like for the Jews of Persia to have light. It is not a switch that turns on. Rather, it is a hint of something different on the horizon, emerging gradually. We experience the hint itself in more emotional ways than when we were previously thoughtlessly bathed in light. The long, slow sunrise feels like something new is being born, and we are blessed to witness it come into the world. In this long, long year, experienced with so much darkness, I have come to understand in a deeper and a more profound way that we are not entitled to light's endless radiance. This year has and continues to offer us an opportunity to pay closer attention to every bit of light we receive, the way it lands with grace and with mercy upon each and every one of us, the way its radiance and piercing expanse is witnessed only when we are truly, deeply aware of its presence, enabling us to see the other. Rodney, Sarah, we see you and we love you. When Shabbat concludes, when we make Havdalah, our sacred separation from Kodesh, from the holy to the whole, to the ordinary, we add the words, Kein tihye lanu, just as they had light, so may we. Emerging from the darkness, our ancestors understood light. Perhaps now, in this moment, we do as well. May this be God's will and blessing as we say, Amen.
Lo